Hope all of you guys are doing great. We're going to continue into chapter 18. Let me know if you have any questions or you have any issues or problems or anything like that. But let's go ahead and jump into the notes that we have for today. Speaking of government intervention, I was just actually listening to President Trump talk about the coronavirus, and it seems like the spread of it is at least slowing down a little bit, which is awesome. I know that it's still until the end of April for this quarantine, and it very well might stretch into May, but there's also the chance that it won't, and that we'll be able to go back. Some of that might be state dependent to see what does the state say, and since we're in a state with one of the larger cities, it might be different for us than some of the other states. But anyways, we talked about the 16th Amendment. Now it's time to talk about the 17th Amendment. The purpose of the 17th Amendment was really, really simple. Further democracy. You see, the 17th Amendment is a simple one where it's the direct election of senators. It was to make sure that there was more power in the hands of the people and less in the government. Before, people elected the senators. It was actually the state legislators. You see, Illinois has its own government, and our government has three branches. I'll actually post a link in Classroom that will be part of this video where you can go if you want to see a little bit about the Illinois government. We actually have 59 senators, 40 of which are Democrat and 19 of which are Republican. And during the 1800s and 1900s, some of those people would have actually voted for our federal or national representatives. But with the 17th Amendment, now that power gets transferred to people. There were pros and cons to this. The pro is that people get to elect who they want to represent them. More democracy. If that's your goal, then you've succeeded. The con was that the state governments had less checks and balances on the federal government. This one, the 18th Amendment, is a little bit unusual, but it's fairly easy for everybody to remember. It's about prohibition. It was to prohibit the manufacturing, the selling, and the transportation of alcohol. It's also the most controversial amendment. In fact, it was so controversial that it gets repealed in the 21st Amendment. Most people during that time period, and I think it would be accurate to say today, view drunkenness as a social problem. And you know what? There's an easy way to fix that problem. You just stop the drink. People in jail blamed alcohol's families were broken because of alcohol. Money was wasted because of alcohol. Easy. The way that we can fix all of those problems? Ban alcohol. And hopefully those things will go away. You know, that's an example of trying to educate people to stop doing something wrong. Some famous speakers will actually popularize this idea as well. The idea is that drinking alcohol itself is a sin. This issue is a little bit more personal, and I always love to have a discussion in class about this because that's what Billy Sunday came up with. And that was something that conservative Christians talked about and discussed all the way until recently. And I always enjoy having that discussion, but unfortunately we don't have that opportunity this year. This then will take us to the 19th Amendment. This one was actually an issue since before the Civil War. So it's not like the progressives created this amendment or anything like that. They were just the ones to finally manage to pass this amendment. But the 19th Amendment grants women the right to vote, or the right for women to have suffrage. Now, the Constitution actually never states that women couldn't vote. And for some reason, it was just assumed that it was not their position to be able to vote. Susan B. Anthony was actually the champion of this cause, so sometimes the 19th Amendment is also called the Anthony Amendment. This was another step towards equal rights. There are few, if any, logical reasons that I can think of for women to not have the opportunity to vote. Other changes included things like exposure towards corruption. You know, during this time period, there was this intense desire for truth. I think that all humans eventually or always have this desire to find out if there's corruption. They want to know if they're being wronged in a circumstance, and they want to fix it. I think that this is built into our moral compasses. Literary figures during this time period would use their words or their articles or their pages, maybe it was through something like The Jungle, to expose corruption within the workplace, or how workers were being exploited for the gain of a singular person. Populism, which is the idea of making people heard who feel oppressed, was also something that was becoming very popular during this time period. I think that even though this idea may have started, and I put started there in quotation marks, but you guys can see, 100+ years ago, it's still very much around today. Think of things like the Me Too movement, or think of the Bill Cosby court case. It plays into what we talked about earlier, that people want or have this intense desire for truth. One of the leaders of the progressive movement was Theodore Roosevelt. Although there were others as well that would champion this cause after he was gone, people like Taft or Woodrow Wilson, who followed after Teddy. Well, Teddy was probably the most aristocratic president since John Adams. He threw all that off and didn't take on that image, but instead took on the image of the common man. He did this through working as a cattle rancher in the Dakotas, or fighting with the Rough Riders in the Spanish-American War. He eventually becomes the civil service commissioner as well as the police commissioner. He graduates from Harvard. He becomes the governor of New York. He becomes the vice president of the United States and eventually the president of the United States. This man had this massive, likable personality. He was incredibly popular with the people. So popular, in fact, here's a little story that is still around today, or at least the product is still around today. Teddy was an extremely famous hunter during his lifetime. He went over to Africa and he hunted and taxidermied thousands of animals. And while he was out, this one wasn't in Africa, but while he was out hunting in 1902, somebody captured a bear and said, hey, you should shoot this bear, and then you can stuff it and study it and different things like that. And Teddy refused to shoot this captured bear. Eventually, this made the news, and it actually becomes a political cartoon. And this was the political cartoon, and toy manufacturers had a heyday with this. What they do is they created these little stuffed bears to sell, and they became widely popular, especially with children. And eventually, the name for these bears became the Teddy Bear. Yes, they're named after Teddy Roosevelt. But Teddy wasn't just all bark and no bite. He had this serious desire to be active as President of the United States. He didn't just want to sit there and let others or Congress do what needed to be done. He wanted to get involved. This is both good and bad. I don't think you can say it's just one way or the other. Excuse me. One of the things he wanted becomes known as the square deal. And the square deal was simply for man and women to be treated fairly and given equal opportunity within the workplace. He wanted businesses to be less secret in their dealings and more upfront with their laborers. He wanted them to be more transparent. One reason that there are less factories in America than there could or should be is because of regulations that the country of America has, that the employer must uplift to the employee. Take Nike, for example. Nike has employees all over the world. I believe they have somewhere around 3,000 factories in 45 different countries or something like this. And the big question is are all of their workers making sure that they're, or I should say, are all of their employees, are all of their factories making sure that their employees are up to date in the sense of they're making a living wage, they're being treated fairly? And the answer to that is just simply no. I don't hate Nike. I don't boycott Nike or anything like that. I actually respect some people who do boycott Nike. But I remember growing up, 2010, 2011, about a decade ago, Nike was getting a lot of flack in the news for some of their factories overseas, specifically in the Philippines, because they were being talked about as sweatshops as well as Indonesia. Here's a short video that talks about that, just so that you see that I'm not crazy or I'm not just targeting one business. Other businesses like Walmart were also guilty of these things. You see, they were afraid of the regulations in America. They knew that it would be more complicated to follow American regulations, so they just moved their factory to a different country.
Some people believe that the workers who produce these sneakers here in Indonesia are paid a good wage. Some people say a great wage. The founder and chairman of Nike, Phil Knight, has gone as far to say that workers are absolutely paid a living wage. Now, a living wage is one that would allow a worker to pay for food, clothing, housing, healthcare, education, some modest savings, and some modest recreation. So I think we need to find out the truth. I'm here in Tangerang, Indonesia, a city that is home to more than a half dozen Nike factories and thousands, tens of thousands of Nike workers. Now, the basic wage for a Nike factory worker in Tangerang, Indonesia is 1,285,000 rupiah per month. So let's find out what that can buy you. So one of the major expenses that workers have is paying for their rent, and I'm lucky enough, I'm here with a Nike factory worker who produces apparel for Nike, and she's going to show us her home and tell us how much it costs her for rent for each month. Yeah. So this is a typical rental house for a Nike factory worker. Berapa per bulan ini rumah? Kontrak. So this costs 200,000, and as you can see, it's just a mat on the floor and not much else. So for the 200,000 that she pays for her room that she rents, she gets electricity and she does get water to do her laundry or to use for bathing. But workers have to buy their drinking water. And drinking water costs approximately per month, it's going to cost them about 25,000 rupiah. So one of the other major expenses for workers is their transportation costs. Now, workers that I've met with have spent anywhere from 100,000 a month to 600,000 a month, and their modes of transportation can vary anywhere from riding a motorcycle like this or taking the local minibus. So we're going to split, take an average, and we're going to say that workers are spending about 350,000 per month on their transportation costs. Okay, so if we take rent is 200,000, and drinking water for the month is 25,000, and transportation is 350,000. That's going to add up to 575,000 rupiah for those three major expenses. Okay, and if we take that 575,000 and we subtract it from the 1,285,000, that's the basic wage, that leaves workers with 710,000 rupiah to meet their basic needs beyond those three expenses for the rest of the month. If you take that 710,000 and you divide it by 30, the average amount of days in a month, that's going to leave you with approximately 24,000 rupiah. To be exact, 23,666.666666 rupiah each day to pay for food and any other expenses that you may have. So we're going to price some things out here and see what 23,000 rupiah could buy you for the day. So we're going to see how much it costs to buy a simple meal of rice and vegetables, a piece of chicken here at one of the local Wartegs. Permisi Ibu, saya mau nasi dan ini ya dan satu ayam. Ya. Ya, sudah. Tinggi ya. So, permisi Pak, berapa? 9,000. So the simple meal of rice and vegetables and a piece of chicken costs 9,000 rupiah. That's 9,000. Two of those would cost you 18,000. So let's say you wanted to have something to drink with one of your meals other than just water. You wanted to get a local brand of iced tea. Te bottle. Permisi ba? Barapa? This will cost you 2,000 rupiah. So after you have your 2 meals, maybe you have a bottle of iced tea. If you want to get a healthy snack, like a banana or 2 bananas. Permisi? Permisi, Pak. Berapa per satu pisang?
Satu pisang 1.000.
1,000. Okay. So 1 banana is going to cost you 1,000 rupiah. So, you know, these are kind of small. So maybe if you got 2 bananas, it's going to cost you 2,000. Okay, so you paid for your rent, your drinking water, transportation. You've paid for your 2 meals, something to drink, some bananas, but you know, and you've run out of money. Well, what if you have other basic needs? You know, what if you need to buy a bar of soap? Permisi ba? Soap, Lifebuoy. Lifebuoy? So for a bar of soap, it's 2,000 rupiah. For a small thing of shampoo, it's 5,000 rupiah. For a small tube of toothpaste, it costs 2,000 rupiah. These are basic needs that everybody has. So you can see by doing this small exercise of just pricing out rent, drinking water, transportation, food, simple things like soap and shampoo and toothpaste, that the wages that Nike's paying to their workers here in Indonesia are clearly not adequate to meet just one adult's basic needs. And we're just talking about an adult. What if you had children, like these kids here that have been following me all over the village?
There were also lots of other regulations that were being passed during this time period, including the Hepburn Act. This one was a railroad regulation that easily enough strengthened the Interstate Commerce Commission, which we talked about in earlier chapters. But it made sure that the railroads had to follow the ICC, the Interstate Commerce Commission. And the biggest way that it did this was through the setting of rates. Before the Hepburn Act, if a railroad company was breaking the rules that the ICC had put in place, the ICC would have to take them to court. That takes up money, time, and during all of that, the railroad company is getting away with their corruption. But now, thanks to the Hepburn Act, if the ICC wanted to set the railroad rate, they could do that, and it was the railroad company's responsibility to take the ICC to court. And the ICC was fighting for the people as opposed to the company itself. Also, things like the Pure Food and Drug Act were created. This one essentially said you're not allowed to sell tainted products or lie about what's in your products. It dealt a lot with false advertising. You know, you buy these magic beans and sure enough you get the story of Jack and the Beanstalk. Well, that's simply not true. If you eat this product or if you take this pill, it's going to make you lose 50 pounds. Or if you do things along this lines. It protected the average person against schemes along those lines. Lastly, you get the Meat Inspection Act, which is simply the overseeing and preparation of the packing of meat. And the group that gets to oversee this is the Department of Agriculture. Due to cattle ranching and herding and different things like that, you had animals that were being herded hundreds of miles all over the country and then further being shipped thousands of miles, or probably not quite thousands of miles, but once again hundreds of miles. And it wouldn't be unreasonable for companies or the cattle ranchers to include animals that were not for eating. And I don't mean like, I don't know, dogs or cats or things like that. I instead mean if an animal is sick and could cause people to get sick, it's really, really hard to be able to catch something like that. So the Department of Agriculture came along and kept up or created these regulations. Now, I'm not one for huge government intervention, but the Department of Agriculture has done somewhat of a good job. They haven't hampered business as much as they could, and it seems to benefit Americans greatly. The increase in confidence of I can go to the store and I can buy frozen meat led to people buying that, which led to growth within the business, which obviously led to economic prosperity within America. You know, one of the challenges that America as a country is facing right now is employment, especially when it comes to something like the coronavirus. And obviously you have the stimulus package, which got passed. If you're an earning American, I don't know if there was an age or different things like that, but you got $1,200 unless you had kids or were earning a specific amount of money. But essentially it was a way to try to protect the people in America. the government intervened. It's really difficult to say whether that was perfect, great, or good, or whether it was bad. Usually you want the states to be able to intervene, but in this case, it was the government that intervened. Probably, I mentioned this earlier, but America's biggest issue is going to be, can they keep people employed? And if they can keep people employed, America will continue on a smooth course. Eventually, the stock market will rise back up again. But if they cannot keep people employed, that's going to create more issues that are way more of a deal. But anyways, I wanted to say thank you guys for watching. Once again, let me know if you have any questions. You are dismissed.